Well, hello everyone. This is our first podcast. My name is Rex Saldana, and now I'll let my counterpart here speak and introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Mark Stevens, and it's interesting because Rex, you're coming from the West Coast.
Oh,
You're 3 hours behind me. I'm on the East Coast
yep.
in South Carolina, so we're coming up from both sides of.
Right. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and so complete opposite ends of the coast. But this is our
Yes,
first attempt at doing a Eurythmics discussion podcast, which is basically just the two of us talking about how we feel about certain Eurythmical subjects. Our first one this week will be Eurythmics video clips, their groundbreaking video clips. We'll start with a little talking about In the Garden because it's the 40th anniversary of that album. Um, but we're looking forward to doing more of these, and we hope that some of the fans out there may want to join us sometime and where we could have a discussion amongst two, three, or four of us about any given Eurythmics topic. And I just think it will be a lot of fun. So these are going to be on the Eurythmics Video Visionaries website, of which I'm the webmaster. And we hope to make this kind of a series. I'm sorry, Mark?
yeah, when did you start that website? How long has it been?
That was in 1999.
Wow.
First started. So yeah, celebrated 20 years. What, last year? Or well, the year that the whole coronavirus thing started. But yeah, so a little over 20 years now, and yeah, it's great to keep it going and that people are interested. So hopefully this will be of even more interest to people.
Yeah, we sort of decided to do this as part of your website, but that you and I have these conversations that we can go on and on for different topics about Eurythmics, and we said, well, this could be interesting, and it's an opportunity at some point to bring in other fans and talk to them. And
right.
so
Not that we thought that we were just so interesting that everybody would be clamoring to hear what we're saying, but we have a lot of fun talking. So we just thought it would be fun to put that down for others to hear, and then invite others to join us. And I'm hoping that when some of the fans hear this, they'll think, wow, yes, I would love to jump in there and add this and add that, and that's what we'd be looking for.
Yeah. Okay then.
All right, so let's start talking about In the Garden. Steve Gaylor's website, Ultimate Eurythmics, is doing a great, promotion for that with all sorts of great photos, some of which I hadn't even seen.
Yeah, great photos.
Yeah, great photos. So, Mark, what are your thoughts on In the Garden 40 years later?
Well, I actually did a post about this the other day. It's crazy that it's 40 years. Just amazing. And when you think back, okay, I was 12 or 13 years old at that point. Now, but the point is, I didn't hear In the Garden until probably 1986 when I found it in a regular mall record store, and
Same with me.
asked my dad to buy it for me, because it wasn't released in the U.S. So we were getting it as as an import, and it was a little more expensive. But my parents were really good about buying me Eurythmics records that tended to be sort of expensive because we couldn't get a lot of them. Just we would get the standard releases, of course.
Right.
But here in the U.S., we were sort of discovering that there was a past to Eurythmics beyond Love Is a Stranger and Sweet Dreams, and of course the follow-up albums. So it was an amazing sort of discovery, and I do remember the first time playing it, and that it wasn't like any of the music that we were accustomed to at that point from Eurythmics. So it was different. But I guess I had heard Never Gonna Cry Again and Take Me to Your Heart because we would have heard them on the Heaven video, the live album video. But those are totally different versions of those songs, very different. So it was quite a change.
Yeah.
What did you think the first time, and how did you hear it the first time?
Well, pretty much the same way as you. I think it was in 1985 when I first stumbled across it in a record store as an import, and I had by that point I knew that it existed, but I had never seen it anywhere, and that was, for me anyways, that was back before the heavy collecting days where I would go into Goldmine magazine or things like that. So it was just pretty much my local area where I grew up in Florida, and came across it in the record store, bought it, took it home, and like you, the first time I heard it, I was surprised because it was not like what we had come to expect so far from Eurythmics. Um, I remember thinking this is very different, but I like it. I also remember being struck that Annie's lyrics sounded very like poetry.
That's exactly what I started to say. It is very poetic,
right? Written in a very poetic way, and she was young, very young then, and when we're all at that age, we're so influenced by every kind of art and culture that we absorb. So, and I know she had mentioned she had been into some poets, so I kind of see that in the lyrics, and I just have to say, I think Dave Stewart's guitar playing on the album is amazing. I mean, it's so, you really have to listen to the album a lot to get all of its nuances. It's as deep as anything else they did, I think, later on in their careers.
Yeah, it was interesting, and I guess at that point I was aware of it. So certainly when I saw it, I knew what it was. And I don't even remember how much I knew that there had been 2 singles. I may have known that. So it was certainly the first time I'd ever heard what would have been the second single, which, of course, as everyone knows, was Belinda.
Right.
Which to me is the only song on that album that sort of still sounds like The Tourist. It was that weird mesh there.
Right, sort of like a bridge between the 2 bands, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm really surprised it was the second single, because
I have to say my partner David, who grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, heard Belinda a lot on the radio, college radio, progressive radio, back when In the Garden was a new album. So he was actually familiar with In the Garden even before Sweet Dreams. He and his circle of Alterna friends had bought and listened to that record, so they were aware of Eurythmics even before Sweet Dreams. So when he tells me those kind of stories, I think, wow,
Well, there's Eurythmics fan. He's a friend of mine, Clem Stoneball in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells the story. He bought In the Garden around the time it was released because his local record store would get in imports. And the guy who ran the record store knew him. And I think Clem had said something to the effect of anything new that I'd like. And he said, hey, if you like Blondie, you'll probably like this album. Mm-hmm. And so he bought it. And he took it home, and he says he didn't listen to it much. He didn't see too much of the connection there. But an interesting story. That's so crazy about Dave.
Yeah.
On the radio station that they were playing that, college radio.
Yeah.
Which that was what college radio did back in the day, at least. I don't know what college radio does now, but they weren't playing necessarily the top 40.
Yeah.
So it was
the Tourists and in the Garden era Eurythmics seem to be fairly well known in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had somebody else I knew years ago who actually saw the Tourists open for somebody, I can't remember who it is, here in the Bay Area at like one of our large venues like the Cow Palace or something like that. So he was like, yeah, I knew who Annie Lennox was before Eurythmics came out. So there were those pockets of places where people heard about it, but I certainly didn't hear about it growing up in conservative Orlando, Florida.
And I did not either in conservative Tennessee. So, but and really, I wasn't really into pop music very much until about Sweet Dreams and a little bit before.
Yeah.
I was still a young teenager. My dad was into music, and I listened. He played a lot of Simon and Garfunkel and country music and different things. So I was exposed to a lot of music, and he really liked music. So I was exposed
you're about 5 years younger than me. So yeah, you were more like 13ish around the time this was all starting, where I was more like 17 and 18.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay. So, I think of us as the exact same age. All of us in Eurythmics land are all the same age.
I know, yeah, we're all like 50?
Yeah, well, maybe we're still 29. Let's say that.
But 17 again.
Yeah, I mean, it was so interesting because Eurythmics have been the soundtrack to my life, as it has for a lot of us that would be interested in all this. But somewhere along the line, I think everyone does this. You connect, or most people do. You connect to music and some artist more than others. Most people do that. I will never understand people who really don't like music or don't connect to certain, because it doesn't compute with
right. Me too. I'm the same way.
Songs are so important to me, and I kind of internalize them. And I can't sing. I wish I could sing, but but music is so important to me, and it always has been. And then discovering Eurythmics, and I don't know what it was. I don't know what. To me, it's like it just happened, And then I didn't buy an album until I think my first album was "Be Yourself Tonight," maybe. So I'm still this kid that I would go to the record store and I would buy their singles. Mm-hmm. So I'd get the Sweet Dreams single, "The Love Is a Stranger," So that's how I got their music, but I wasn't buying the albums. It still wasn't connecting to me that this is how all this works. Again, I just, you're young and this is how you're doing it.
Yeah.
I know it's different for a lot of people. I don't know how you.
And by the time they, Sweet Dreams hit, I was 17. I was already into music, already buying albums. But I would buy the singles as well, just because I love the picture sleeves so much. And they were so, so different and cool. Like, well, that's another podcast topic, is picture sleeves. But going back to In the Garden, I just wanted to, I recently listened to it and jotted down a few notes as I was listening to it, just, some impressions that it made on me. And, in English Summer, you hear, Dave has recordings of like street recordings, sounds of like cars and everyday life. And that was pretty groundbreaking back then. And also that kind of thing was also, I think, criticized by a lot of music critics at the time, not just him doing it, but maybe others, as, kind of like, what are they doing? Why does that need to be in there? We've come full circle now, and that is the norm in production now, is to have any kind of sounds. I think we first started seeing that with Beck in the mid 90s, where he was doing a cut and paste of all kinds of sounds and putting them together, including, live action sounds like Dave did. So that was something that struck me as being pretty groundbreaking.
And I think, and I don't know where, if I read this or it's in the Connie Plank, there's a great documentary about him, but I believe he's the one who encouraged Dave to do things like that, and that he talked about noise is a totally different thing, and noise can be part of the music, and right. And that's and
we know that Dave, when Dave was young, he used to like to go around with a tape recorder and record sound. So you have that influence, plus Connie helping him along with that as well. And so you see something that basically throughout their career, they always incorporated sounds like that into their songs, even if some of it was very subtle and not so obvious.
Right. It's always cool.
And then I was thinking about Belinda, her vocals are so kind of light and breathy through the whole thing. And then you get to the end and there's that backing singing where she's, doing those kind of like woes and it's very intense, and it foreshadows what we were to hear from her later, vocally. I think on In the Garden, I don't want to say she restrained her vocals, but they were a certain type of vocals that were presented in a certain way, I think, for the material on the album. And but you can hear subtle influences of the deep soulfulness and the the voice, which was to come, the iconic voice that we would all get used to.
Yeah, crazy though. 40 years, just crazy. I mean,
yeah.
And and I'm still hoping. I know everyone is, that Sony or music, whoever, the record label, somebody will start doing some anniversary pieces with these things. Still very hopeful for Sweet Dreams. We've got a couple of years that maybe they could put something together and do something crazy.
Yeah, so that would be 2023, right? So let's hope.
Well, or 2022, depending on if you're going by it was 1983.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a few more things
What else?
on In the Garden. She's invisible now, has the numerical counting down in the background, which we were to see later, of course, on Double Plus Good, and the use of that kind of rhythmic stuff on the, on Savage and things like that. I was going to say that, all the young people of today, when you think back to the 1980s, there was often such a critique of that kind of yuppie go get 'em culture. But Annie seems to be. There's a positive message in the song, about how good this is that young people are getting out there and doing their thing. And I just thought that was interesting in retrospect, because you hear so much, you hear about it talk so negatively these days about, the consumerism of the 80s, the whole yuppie mentality. And I just found it interesting that she was sort of embracing that at a point in that song.
Yeah, that and Take Me to Your Heart would have been great singles from that album.
Yes.
I still think,
Take Me to Your Heart should have been a single. Definitely.
Yeah, I always thought that for the greatest hits, the first greatest hits in 91, was it? That they should have gone back and revamped one of the In the Garden songs, either Take Me to Your Heart or even Never Gonna Cry Again, instead of, the remix reissues of Love is a Stranger and Sweet Dreams.
Right.
Or, I just, that would have been interesting to me. I think that would have been, because they had really changed those songs in live performances, and they could have really revamped it in that sort of style. So anyway,
yeah,
no one asked me.
It sort of reminds me of how the Revenge album translated. It was much different on record than live. It was two different feels, and I always thought, wow, if they could imagine taking an album like Savage and giving it that live band treatment. I mean, can you imagine what that would be like? Anyways, we're going off on another little tangent here, but one last thing I want to say about In the Garden was on Sing Sing. She's singing in French. Of course, we were used to hearing Debbie Harry already singing in French with Denis. That's sort of the new wave singer who's singing in French. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, that foreshadowed Tous les Garçons, which came later. And I just always found that interesting that Debbie Harry sang in French, Annie Lennox sang in French. It sort of seemed to be, and maybe some other female artist did. I'm sure somebody out there is probably thinking, somebody's, this person sang in French. But I just thought it was interesting. Here you have two of New Wave's biggest divas, and they're both sort of dabbling in the French singing.
I think Annie was obviously very influenced by Debbie Harry. And even as, she and Dave were creating their music, I think she was already being influenced by Debbie Harry. Very, well influenced, of course. But yeah, that's interesting. And Debbie Harry did it really well, the French songs and things like that. So,
right. And so it just did it become sort of like a new wave, just a thing to do, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know. Were there other artists out there that sang songs in French that were, new wave artists? I'm sure there were, but
yeah, I don't know.
Maybe somebody can let us know.
But I mean, I guess that gives us a good lead. So we wanted to talk about videos because, of course, your website is Video Visionaries and Eurythmics Video Visionaries. And so for this first podcast, we wanted to talk about some of the videos from Eurythmics. So that kind of leads us to the Never Gonna Cry Again video, which is so strange because there's a great recording on YouTube. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Right.
We've, and thank goodness we've got it. And it's a really quality recording, but it's never made any of the video releases, the Greatest Hits video album, the Ultimate Collection video album.
There's been speculation
that
it had to do with some sort of rights. I'm not sure why it I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think that it didn't even get shown very much because two of the musicians / actors in the video didn't have were German, and they didn't.
Oh, right. Yes.
British Musicians Unionship or something, and so they couldn't show it. So, and don't know all the details of how all those things sort of worked, but if that was the case, you'd think that would be gone. My guess is it's like a lot of these things, is that master tape just lost, that nobody actually even has it now, which is really sad. But a really interesting video, which was such a thrill the first time I saw that. And I have no idea how many years later it was before I saw the video. Yeah. So we did see that little clip. They used part of it on the Sweet Dreams video album during the Jennifer.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
And we had that.
Wasn't that always intriguing to see that little clip? You were like, "What is that?" And you kind of knew there was another video somewhere that you hadn't seen. At least for those of us in America, maybe the folks in Europe had a little more access to it than we did. Yeah.
But it's a really interesting video in the sense of and I think so she goes back, she goes into the ocean at the end, and she's just repeating, never gonna cry again, never gonna cry again. And so you're getting a sense of, okay, she's walking into the ocean and she's not coming back, which of course is the flip side of that video, where in part of the video she comes out of the ocean in sort of reverse motion.
Right.
But I think most people have probably seen it by now. If you haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube because it's worth seeing.
Yeah. Well,
but so it's kind of a very sad song in a way. But then when she's performing it live, it's kind of a real kick-ass song in a way. I'm never going to cry again, and kind of.
I've always thought of the video is kind of it seems to be like Here Comes the Rain Again before Here Comes the Rain Again, in terms of the themes. I mean, forlorn, love lost, walking alone by the water. Then you even have Dave following her around, or following people around, taking notes and stuff, sort of like he is in the Here Comes the Rain Again video, where we see him like filming her, or the appearance of him stalking her and filming her. So I think there were the ideas in that video which they fleshed out later in Here Comes the Rain Again. But it's also very like Fellini-esque, kind of Fellini or Bergman. It's got that kind of funny imagery, especially with all the different characters on the beach, and the way the way it's filmed, and the movements and all that. It just looks like two artists got together and said, who had actually seen a lot of films, and said, let's make this great video. And
yeah, very interesting first video.
Yeah.
And Belinda didn't have a video that anyone knows of. I've never heard of one. There's never been any discussion of it, so I'm assuming there was never a video for Belinda.
Yeah, we can maybe consider one of the live, like, Old Grey Whistle Test performances the video, or something like that.
Yeah, true. So I mean, their next video would have been
The Walk, probably, right?
Yeah. And that's the second single from
being U.S. centric here, I to me the singles were Love Is a Stranger, Here Comes the Rain Again. I mean, Sweet Dreams. But yeah, The Walk. Yeah. The Walk was first in the UK. Oh well.
Yeah, is that right? The Walk, and This Is the House, and so The Walk had a video, and which has again never been on any of the video albums.
Yeah.
Really wasn't discovered until what? About
like 2005. Yeah.
Didn't you interview?
I interviewed the director Marek Budziński. I believe that's how you say his name. For my website back then, and it was filmed in some sort of brewery or something. Somebody that Dave knew. That's why you can see the kegs of beer as she's walking along.
She's in a black wig too.
It's interesting that it came after Never Gonna Cry Again, because I think Never Gonna Cry Again is a better made video than The Walk, and I think they acted better in the Never Gonna Cry Again video. In this video, she doesn't seem too sure of herself in the video. It's not the best performance.
No.
Which and I think they know that, and I think that's why it was probably never released. It's interesting.
But it was college. Was college kids, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
that were doing the shooting. Sophie Muller, who went on, years later, who would be part of the groundbreaking video director for Savage and many, 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 many other artists and other stuff for Eurythmics, of course. She's the one that did the editing. So
Right.
these kids,
her and Marek were friends. They were at the same schooling together or something like that. So they knew each other, and that's, I think, probably the beginnings of how they knew her. Interesting that it would be such a long time before they would work with her again. Not until 1987.
Yes, but anyway, that is fascinating that that there's that connection.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thing that you'll see along with Eurythmics over the years, that some connections stay and they'll come back and come in and out, and that Sophie Muller would have been part of that. It's just insane. But an interesting video, but like you said, the not on the professionalism of certainly what was to come.
Exactly.
I suspect maybe they had a bigger budget for Never Gonna Cry Again. Maybe the record label was giving them some money for that. I don't know for sure.
I guess next would have been Love Is a Stranger, and that's quite a leap from Never Gonna Cry Again or The Walk. That's considered I think one of the best videos of all time, and it's certainly shot very well. And Steve Rapport, the photographer, talks about how it's kind of film noirish and it seems to be kind of a pastiche. It doesn't really seem to be like about one particular thing. It seems to have a bunch of ideas going on in there about, like Steve said in the interview I did with him, is she a call girl? is she just
a robot?
Yeah. Is she just a normal person? Is she just on the bad side of a breakup? Is she in love with somebody? Is she a call girl? What's going on here? Is it all just the personas we have inside us? How we feel at certain times.
Yeah, and is it supposed to be futuristic as well? All these things that are supposed to look futuristic, which is so weird because everybody talks about it now that it looks like Dave is talking on an iPhone.
Yeah, right. Which I believe was actually Steve Rapport's light meter. Yeah.
But and at one point, when she gets out of the car, the door opens itself. So I think these are just little things that I think you're supposed to catch, and I think it's that thing about film and different things that all of us are supposed to get different things out of it.
Right.
Clearly, Dave and Annie had a concept for it, but we don't necessarily know what that concept is, and are we getting that exact concept?
Exactly.
Supposedly, it was controversial in the U.S., and she had to prove that she was a woman and not a man. You always hear this, and it always seems so ridiculous to me, because I'm going to go back to, again, how young I was and just discovering music. And I think none of these Sweet Dreams and none of this stuff shocked me. And again, I'm this young kid, but none of it's, and I think there's a reason for it. And I was trying to think about this the other day. Again, I wasn't really into music. I didn't have MTV for many years, didn't have cable for many years, just had sort of the, I saw videos on, what was it, Friday night videos on NBC or some thing.
Yeah.
So that's what I was, and most people, videos were, that's just sort of where I discovered what music looked like visually. And I had no concept that this was different or strange. I just saw it like, wow. I remember going to school on Monday after seeing Love Is a Stranger on Friday night videos and trying to explain it to my friends, who all were, my close friends were all into Eurythmics and Culture Club and Duran Duran and all the stuff one should be in, and about in the 80s, and trying to describe it, because I didn't even know the song yet, hadn't bought the single, couldn't really internalize what the lyrics were saying. So it was what a great video. I mean, it just,
right.
And it still looks, perfect today.
Right.
A lot of videos shot way back then, they're fuzzy and they're not well shot. I mean, this was, film. just art.
Well, they're slowly, remastering them, 4King them and HDing them. So I've noticed they only seem to look better when they are upgraded. So yeah,
Amazing.
um, yeah, that I remember, the whole controversy. She rips off the wig, she's got the short hair, and oh my gosh, is she a man? We got to see her birth certificate and all this kind of BS. I I was never shocked either. I when like, okay, so she takes off her wig. I just thought, okay, so she's got short hair underneath there. She likes to wear wigs. I mean, I did. My first thought wasn't like, oh my god,
Yeah.
that's a man, and oh my gosh,
Mm.
she was pretending to be a man all along, and what if I was turned on by her, and then all of a sudden it was a guy, how or whatever, it's like I clearly, I think that's what got under some people's skin is, the people that were in an uproar about it was maybe they were finding her attractive. And then all of a sudden, oh no, was I finding a boy attractive and I didn't realize it? But again,
Well, that's it.
the whole thing was so dumb to me because I never, when we've talked about this before, I never thought she was a man. I always knew she was a woman. I always knew the theatricality of it, so the whole up in arms business I found very amusing and frustrating as well because it would translate into people I knew who would make comments, like
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. Your concept there of why it bothered certain people, and to me, it's interesting that you're still again you were older than I, 17, or I was 13, 14, whatever it was, and it's interesting to me that this somehow wasn't. It didn't shock me, as it. I think older people were more apt to be, and maybe that's just it. Maybe that's maybe older people would be shocked by some video today, where younger people are like, nah, that's just normal. So that's interesting how
yeah.
maybe age and different philosophy and stuff. But
I think I was more I don't know, I wouldn't even use the word shocked, but more shocked by the orange short hair than the fact that maybe there was anything androgynous going on or anything like that. You know, especially in the Sweet Dreams video, when you first see her, and it is a bit of a shock. I remember the first time seeing that video and thinking, but I remember my first thought was, wow, I love this. This is so cool. That was my first thought, and well, clearly it struck a chord because it went big time. But yeah, there's so many things going on in that video. The whole video, I think, is Sweet Dreams is basically about how the record companies versus the artists, basically, and how record companies want you to be a certain way, act a certain way, but they weren't going to do that. They were going to break the mold. We don't, you want us out in the field with the cows, then we'll just bring the cow right into the boardroom, and
well, it must have been whenever the record store finally heard Sweet Dreams, and they said, okay, we're going to release this as a single. And Annie has talked about it so often. She wasn't even sure that it was a single, because it's a very strange song.
yeah.
So was Love is a Stranger, for that matter. That is not a normal concept for a song, how it's written, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Sweet Dreams really threw anything out of the ballpark on how a song should be written. But it must have been crazy for the record company. First, they have this song, which is totally different, and there's someone in the record company going, this is a hit. This is a hit. And then they have this video that okay, what the hell is this?
Well, it was basically skewering them, to me, when I first saw it, of course, I was a teenager and a lot of it didn't make sense. It just seemed very surreal. But now that I'm older, I look at it with different eyes, and I just see, they're both laying on the table while the cow walks around, sort of like being served up to the industry, or to me, the cows symbolize kind of maybe the general population, or what the record company wants to target to be very mainstream. So here you have the cow walking around them in the boardroom while they're laying on the table. To me, it's just all very much like, we're being offered up to this, to this entity that wants us to basically sell our souls to make money. and they weren't going to do that. And that's what the whole video is about. Is like we're going to flip this, and we're going to that's what
that is interesting because they had a very they'd had a rocky relationship with the record company from the Tourist, and they owed the record company a lot of money at the end of the Tourist, and so they were always very cautious, and I don't think either one of them believed that. I'm sure they had people in the record company that they liked and believed in, but neither one of them, Dave or Annie, were going to let themselves think that the record company cared one iota about them personally. Right. The record company cared about how much money they could make.
Right.
Which, clearly Dave and Annie made a lot of money for the record company back in the day.
And doing it their way. Yeah. So I think, okay, so we'll move on to the Touch album. And of course, I think the first video was Who's That Girl?
Yeah. And that's the video.
Yeah, which I remember I think they were even showing that in the US on MTV before the Touch album even came out. Because that video had already been made, I think. And yeah, so, well, what can you say about that video? Of course, it has the groundbreaking scene at the end where she kisses herself, and that caused quite a bit of comment. Of course, she followed up with the performance in drag on the Grammys.
Around the same time, yeah. But, and as you said, that MTV was showing it some, but I still think for the most part, the majority of the public did not see Who's That Girl here in the US until after Here Comes the Rain Again.
Yeah.
And around that same time that Here Comes the Rain Again was coming out was the Grammy Awards, and she's in that same character as the man that she plays in the Who's That Girl video, which is such a, two different characters in that video for her. That singer and that black dress and that blonde wig, and
very it's very 60s inspired, and it's almost filmed like like one of those 60s romantic melodramas, that kind of, it's very colorful, yet there's all sorts of angst going on, and
I mean, that was their third, that was released sort of on its own before Touch. It was part of Touch, but sort of as an independent single.
Yeah.
But when you think about that video and all of the different musicians and stars and celebrity people who were in it, and you have to think, even then, that people wanted to be part of whatever this thing was that was Eurythmics, because even though they had major success with Sweet Dreams and the re-release of Love is a Stranger, they still were not what they came to be by 1985 and 1986, where they were just huge all around the world. So when you think about that, I think that says a lot about who they were as musicians, who they were with video, that they could attract all of these people.
Yeah.
Say, hey, you want to be in this video? Yeah. And it was such a great video. And we've got some trivia that we had from our interview with Lawrence Stevens. Remember, he's in that. Lawrence Stevens, who most people know, designed most of all of the record sleeves, album covers, record sleeves for Eurythmics, the designer. But he plays the male version, the backside. When you see him and Annie walking out.
Yeah.
So she needed a male counterpart to walk out with backward. So they just used him. I guess they could have done the same thing and superimposed her in that, but there'd been no point. So blink and you miss it, I think.
Yeah. I think Lawrence is very thrilled about that.
A part of music history in there.
But
the guy
wanted to comment on her the Grammy performance where she dressed up like Earl. And there's been talk about it over the years, and she's made comments about, apparently this really struck a chord, and it for me it struck a huge chord when I saw that. I can't even begin to. That's probably one of my Eurythmics watershed moments, where something just affected me so much that it influenced how I felt about them going forward in a much different way. When I saw that performance, I remember thinking, where's Annie? I heard her. I didn't see her. I was completely fooled by it. Then as I realized, like midway through, oh my God, that's her. It was like a lightning bolt struck me. And to this day, I still can't really put into words what that meant to me. I think what it really meant to me was it gave me a glimpse of what I was going to like artistically later as an adult. Like it sort of foreshadowed the types of experimentation and progressiveness with art that I would enjoy later. So it sort of opened my eyes to a whole different kind of artistic world. You know, aside from the obvious gay thing, this was somebody in drag. I mean, it just really had a big effect on me for the reason I just said.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was
interesting. And I don't know when I actually first saw that. I don't think I saw that live. I have no memory of watching the Grammys and seeing that. So I don't think I did. I probably heard about it the next day or whatever day it would have been at school, wherever. I think because when you read back on the stories about it, it was supposed to be Michael Jackson's night. He was up for every award under the sun. But the thing that people were writing about was Annie Lennox as a man on the Grammys.
Right. Yeah.
So it was interesting. I never heard if Michael Jackson was upset about that. I'm assuming he wasn't.
I wouldn't think so. That was also the night Culture Club won for Best New Artist. The Eurythmics were also nominated. Yeah.
That's right. And I think he said something. What was his quote? America knows a good drag queen when she sees one.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then you actually had, Annie in drag.
Right. They weren't even there. They were accepting remotely via video.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. But imagine how controversial what he just said was on American television.
Yeah.
And I don't know which came first, their performance or
I believe their performance came first. Yeah.
And so, so America is watching this and they're getting a lot of stuff,
mm-hmm.
And
what was interesting about his comment about, knowing a good drag queen when you see it was that was still back in the time where he was being very ambiguous. It's like, is he gay? Is he not gay? Are you gay? Are you not gay? And so I remember thinking when he said that, it's like, wow, so that's kind of like you're now admitting it, Not that you have to be gay to be a drag queen. I'm just saying,
Well, yeah, I mean, it was interesting because it certainly wasn't said. And even when he said it, people didn't say the word. I mean, it just, they didn't say it. Then. I mean, you may have, but it was still one of those things that, well, we won't talk about it. It was such a weird time when you think about how far we've come in that. But really, in the 80s and music and how it changed culture and how it changed lives much then and later on. It's really quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. Right By Your Side would be the next video. Of course, that was one of the, was that the first performance video from the band?
Yeah. And Dave and Annie actually got that wrong. They did this great interview video with them a couple of years ago 3 years ago when the new vinyl came out. Mm-hmm. And Dave actually refers to it was their first performance video being Would I Lie to You? But it wasn't. It was Right By Your Side because actually Would I Lie to You is more of a performance / live video. But Right By Your Side is basically this is what we look like live. This is what it looks like on our tour. And I suspect that was part of the reason. They were going out again on the Touch tour and it was a good promotion for that. It still surprises me. I love that video, by the way. I love that song. I love that video. I love her outfit.
Yeah.
The leopard pillbox hat.
Iconic.
Leopard.
Yeah. That.
Oh my.
She pretty much, with that one video, she pretty much patented that whole 80s leopard pillbox kind of look you saw it everywhere for the next 10 years. You couldn't walk into into a Spencer Gifts or any of those kind of stores where you wouldn't see some woman in a leopard pillbox hat, some image of that, whether it be a mask you could buy or a ceramic something or other.
But I mean, she looked so stylish to me, that whole thing, but she had her own style. Nobody else, even though like you're saying, it did get copied and it was but nobody had done it, and she wasn't doing it because it was an 80s thing to do. She was taking this and, okay, I'm going to have all these pillbox hats made. And, they were very, I guess, 60-ish inspired or whatever. But I mean, nobody looked like her. Nobody did anything like that. I mean,
Well, I
it
think
just
she
was.
used to talk about how she'd go to thrift stores and find all sorts of odds and ends, and that hat, that leopard skin she has draped across her was most likely bought at thrift stores or something like that.
Yeah.
You're right, and nobody else was kind of doing that. And again, you're right. It wasn't about the '80s. It was about the art and what they were doing at that moment, and their influences. And I just think they really loved that visual medium. I mean, they made no bones about how much they loved making videos. And that was something I never understood about, you would hear some artists say, oh, we hate making videos and all that. And I always thought, why would you hate that? That seems like it would be a natural extension of what you're already doing to get even more creative. But, I guess not everybody has those types of interests. So Dave and Annie did.
I mean, any kind of filming is long and tedious, and I suspect that's where a lot of people came in, that it was hours and maybe days of doing the same thing, and not in the end, it probably lost its, fascination if you weren't doing it. But a great video, very simple, and it still shocks me a little bit that "Here Comes the Rain Again" was the third and final single from the Touch It album, because that video, again, is so amazing. Yeah. Absolutely.
That was one of those ones that caused a sensation. I remember I hadn't seen it yet, and I was at school, and one of my classmates said, "Have you seen the new Eurythmics video? She's walking around in her nightgown." And, and I'm like, what? With that hair, she's walking around in what's going on? So yeah, couldn't wait to see that. And I remember it was brand new at the time. The video was brand new, so sometimes there's that little bit of a lag, like when they premiere a video for the first time, and then maybe you don't see it for maybe a week or so, and then all of a sudden you start to see it. So I was in that lag period where they weren't kind of showing it heavily yet, but I had already heard about it. So when I finally saw it, it was like, oh wow, yeah. I mean, it blows you away.
And we should remind people again, in the U.S., it was the first single from Touch, and we got "Here Comes the Rain Again," followed by "Who's That Girl," which had been released months and months earlier. And then we got, because "Who's That Girl" was getting released in England, and "Sweet Dreams" had barely been #1 here. So we had a long lag here in the US in catching up with the rest of the world on Eurythmics. But so "Here Comes the Rain Again" was first single, followed by "Who's That Girl," and then "Right by Your Side." But but think about the nightgown for just a minute. And rock music, pop videos. No one else who was wearing a cotton all the way down to her feet.
Exactly.
She had to, it was cold in the Orkney Islands where they shot this. It was freezing.
That was no sexy nightgown. That was just your standard issue, plain Jane nightgown, and there was nothing sexy about it. But yet, there was everything sexy about it. I mean. In trying to be, well, I mean, the song is a romantic song to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. But it is that sort of, you're supposed to be really intrigued with this character in this video, and what is she doing? And like you said, it is this romantic song, "Talk to Me Like Lovers Do," and all this stuff, but it again is just Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart doing what they do, because no one else would have done that video. They were certainly, if they were doing somebody else, and you would have had somebody in this long flowing silk gown that was blowing in the wind. Mm-hmm. No one else did what the Eurythmics did. And I love that video for its setting. As soon as I saw it back in it would have been February 1984 for us, I guess. I wanted to see wherever this was. And, I finally got to do that, I think 2000.
Yeah, I knew you've been there. That's great.
And I would recommend anyone who can ever go, and it is at the top of Scotland, the Orkney Islands, and the big cliff is called the Old Man of Hoy.
Yeah.
And we, hiked out to where they filmed the video overlooking the big cliffs and stuff. One of the most otherworldly places I've ever been. But I was obsessed with that. again, kind of obsessed with Eurythmics, obsessed with their music, but I became obsessed with that video. Where on earth is this?
Right.
It looked like nothing else you'd ever seen.
Yeah.
Just fascinated by that video.
Yeah, and I like what you said about how, if somebody else had done it, yeah, it would have been a beautiful model in a nightgown, with rain, rain, wind and rain and all. And I love that you don't see any rain in the video until that one image where, they show her in the mirror or whatever, and you see rain pouring very briefly. But
Yeah.
there's no rain when she's walking around. There's no rain, during the normal course of the video. Later, you see her walking on rain slicked steps and things like that, which Steve Rapport said that they slicked those down on purpose because they look better on camera to have them
interesting,
a little more reflective.
All the things.
So who knows if that it would even been done, So really, the only allusion to rain in the whole video is that one brief sequence where they show, like a superimposed image of rain, and so yeah, it's just. It stands by itself, and it certainly doesn't look like something that would be made for a teenage audience.
No.
But then again, you could say that about any of their videos,
Yeah.
Wow, we're going on 50 minutes now.
This may be should we say this is a part one?
Yeah, let's see. So we got through. Well, we could talk about "Be Yourself Tonight" really quick, and then we could then.
Or do we need to talk about 1984?
Oh, 1984. Yes. We need to talk about 1984. We'll talk about 1984, and then we'll do a part two.
All right. But so you had Sex Crime, 1984, and of course Julia from the 1984 soundtrack album, however you're supposed to refer to it. Soundtrack, Eurythmics album. Never really sure how you were supposed to refer to it.
It's both, really. It's both. It plays more like an album than a soundtrack.
Yeah. It would have been interesting if there had been a soundtrack with more of their, the background music that was part of the film eventually.
Yeah.
And again, that's another anniversary album that we all would hope would come out, and we would get all of those sort of additional pieces of music that Dave's always talked about that they have, and we know that was part of the film eventually. So that would be great. But that was a great video. I mean, for Sex Crime, again, another sort of performance video in a way, but not really.
I'm not a big fan of videos. I'm not a big fan of videos where they intersperse, scenes from movies. But this one seems to work fairly well. The scapes of the movie and the scapes of the video seem to mesh well, and which of course obviously was, I think, deliberate on their part. If we're going to do this, let's make sure it looks good. It's great to see her sort of being aggressive in a band-like format with the guitar and
yes, playing the guitar.
Yeah, and singing and shouting like that. That's some very interesting imagery. Some of my favorite imagery actually is from that video shoot of the two of them like that. I think they just look very striking.
And Steve shot that too, right? I mean, he's got great.
Yeah, Steve shot that.
Great photos from there. And remember how she looked. I mean, she's blonde in that video.
Yeah.
Totally new, quote, look for her and how the public would perceive it, and I think,
I think we talked about it.
She was no longer.
To me, it's very reminiscent of the of Cabaret and the blonde Nazi youth who sings the patriotic song in the middle of the film and they're out in the country, going along with that kind of fascist whole, I mean, it looks like that to me. That's what I imagine. That's the reference point, is that not that she was trying to look like a Nazi, but she's referencing oppression, fascism, Nazism through that look. And then of course, because she's a woman, it sort of upends the whole thing because it looks androgynous and but one of her most striking looks, I think, is in that video. She looks great. They both look great in that video.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And she shot in that same location again in 2009, the David Gray.
Right. At Battersea.
That's where they shot. Is that weird?
That's an iconic.
Yeah. I mean, it looked like it was abandoned at the time.
Yeah, iconic place.
But yeah,
It was on the Pink Floyd album cover, and yeah, scene of the 1984 video, and then Full Steam, and of course now Julia, groundbreaking, of course, because that was later copied by Sinead O'Connor for Nothing Compares to You, the close up of the face just for the entire video. I think Annie's, the Eurythmics, Julia had more types of different facial shots, whereas Sinead O'Connor's video, I think, just focused on her singular face for the whole video. But still, clearly, I think Sinead O'Connor was inspired by that.
and Julia, and they using, repetitious, where it would come back in and out that same scene, and so well edited and done with that. And what a really great song. Totally different song. I mean, I think it didn't do well anywhere really of any consequence.
Yeah.
Didn't make the top 40 in England, but such a beautiful song. I would have loved to have heard that song live over the years.
It is a great song, and I love his guitar work at the end is really great. And yeah, there's like the single version, which I think both the single version and the long album version play very well. I like both of them. It is a very underrated song. I try to get people to sort of into it and to hear it, but people don't really respond to that one for some reason. I guess maybe because it requires it's slow. It requires a lot of listening and paying close attention.
I think it is one of those songs. It's going to touch you in a different way, a different time. People may respond to it in a different point in their life or at some point, but really quite an exceptional song. It's just everything on that album. I mean, we sound very much like, well, everything's great, and but but we are fans. But when you think about that time period, I mean, just the incredible stuff they had been putting out. I mean, this was an amazing body of work.
Yeah.
And, they still had lots of albums and singles and videos to come.
Right.
Maybe that's a good segue to part two. We didn't expect to talk, but I think that's the point of this podcast, that, we want to bring people in and kind of talk like this. And,
right. Yeah, our initial goal was
to
keep it to about 45 minutes, but, yeah. I guess we can consider a good hour, not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, in the next one we'll talk about the rest of the videos, and and hopefully we can have other fans join us. We'll definitely be putting out some information on how we can do that. But I hope everybody enjoyed listening to us rambling on and on about Eurythmics.
Well, yeah, hopefully it's interesting to people. Everyone should let us know, okay, is it too much rambling? Are we talking about things that's interesting? Of course, we know we're talking about a lot of things that people know.
Right.
But we wanted to sort of, because of your website and what it is, that we did want to make sure that we did something about the videos.
Yeah.
And we could have more succinct topics as we move forward.
Right.
That are very much specifically about something. So
yeah, I think it was good, good to get the way we discuss out there. People can listen to it and decide. Like I said, we're just talking, and that's all we want to do, is we want to have a dialogue with each other, and then hopefully bring in some other fans as well. And the goal isn't to give you anything new and groundbreaking. It's just fun and interesting to talk about Eurythmics and their work and how we feel about it, and get your perspective on something, my perspective, somebody else's. So that's mainly the goal of all this.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So all right. Well, until next time.
All right. Thanks a bunch. Thanks.